The Last Train to Nowhere, Part 1. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, and the small town of Ashwood was beginning to look like it might drown in its own misery. But nobody seemed to care, because they were all too busy worrying about the strange things that had been happening at the old railway station on the edge of town. 14-year-old Sam Walker had heard the stories his whole life. The ones about the last train that ever pulled into Ashwood Station back in 1952. The one that arrived on a Tuesday evening with every window dark and not a single passenger on board. The one that the conductor himself refused to talk about until the day he died. Sam was not the kind of kid who believed in ghost stories or silly legends that old people told around fires to scare children. But something had changed 3 nights ago, when he woke up at exactly 2:17 in the morning to the sound of a train whistle, a long and mournful cry that seemed to come from everywhere. And nowhere all at once. The problem was simple and terrifying at the same time. There had been no working railway in Ashwood for over 40 years. He told his best friend Maya about it at school the next day, whispering across the lunch table, while the other kids threw food and laughed about things that did not matter. "You were dreaming," Maya said, pushing her glasses up her nose the way she always did when she thought someone was being ridiculous. "I was not dreaming," Sam insisted, leaning closer so nobody else could hear. "I went to my window and I could see lights moving along the old tracks, Maya. Actual lights, like a train was rolling through town in the middle of the night." Maya stared at him for a long time, and Sam could see the battle happening behind her eyes. The part of her that loved logic and science, fighting against the part of her that loved mystery and adventure. And he already knew which side was going to win, because Maya could never resist a puzzle. "Fine," she said at last. "We go tonight, and we see for ourselves. But when it turns out to be nothing more than car headlights reflecting off the old rails, you owe me a pizza." "Deal," Sam said, and they shook hands across the table like two generals agreeing to a truce before a great battle. That night, Sam sneaked out of his house at 1:30, moving through the darkness with the careful steps of someone who had practiced this many times before. Though in truth, he had never sneaked out even once in his entire life, and his heart was beating so hard, he was sure the neighbors could hear it. He found Maya waiting at the corner of Oak Street and Pine Road, wearing her black jacket and carrying a flashlight that looked big enough to signal ships at sea. "You brought that?" Sam whispered. "I brought this, and also a notebook, a camera, 2 granola bars, a compass, and a first aid kit," Maya replied without a hint of embarrassment. Preparation is the difference between adventure and disaster. They walked together through the sleeping town, past the dark windows of the bakery, and the hardware store, and the little bookshop that always smelled like coffee and old paper. Past the park where they used to play as children, and the library where Maya had read every single book on the first 2 floors. Until they reached the edge of town, where the old railway station sat like a forgotten monument to a time nobody remembered anymore. The station itself was a sad and beautiful thing, a building made of red brick that had faded to the color of dried blood over the decades, with tall arched windows that had long ago lost their glass, and a platform that was cracked and covered in weeds, that pushed up through the concrete like small green fists punching their way toward the sky. "It looks different at night," Maya admitted, and Sam noticed that her voice had dropped to a whisper, without her meaning. They found a spot behind a cluster of old bushes near the platform, and settled down to wait. And for a long time, nothing happened at all. Just the sound of the wind moving through the empty building, and the occasional cry of some night bird that Sam could not identify. "What time is it?" Maya asked, after what felt like forever. Sam checked his watch. 10 minutes past 2. "Maybe it only happens on certain nights." "Maybe," Sam agreed, but something in his gut told him to be patient, told him that whatever was coming was worth waiting for. And then at exactly 2:17, just like before, the whistle came. It started low and far away, like the memory of a sound rather than the sound itself. And then it grew and grew until it filled the entire night. A long wailing note that was the saddest thing Sam had ever heard. Sadder than the time his grandmother died. Sadder than the day his father left. Sadder than anything he had words for. His arm, and squeezed so hard it hurt. But Sam barely noticed, because he was staring at the tracks, where 2 points of light had appeared in the distance, growing larger and brighter with every passing second. "That is not car headlights," Maya breathed. "No," Sam agreed, "it is not." The lights grew, and the sound of the whistle was joined by the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails, a sound that should have been impossible on tracks that were rusted and broken and had not supported a train in decades. And yet there it was, unmistakable and getting closer. And then the train appeared. It came around the bend in the tracks like something from another century, a great black locomotive pulling 4 passenger cars behind it, steam or smoke or something else entirely pouring from its stack and rising into the night sky like a column of gray ghosts climbing toward the stars. The train slowed as it approached the station, and Sam could see that every window in the train was empty, the glass dark and reflecting only the flicker of the lights from the station platform. And then, with a final hiss of air, the train stopped, and the doors began to open. Every car was glowing with a warm golden light. But the light seemed wrong somehow, too steady and too perfect, like the light in a painting rather than the light in real life. "We should go," Maya whispered, and for the first time since he had known her, Sam heard genuine fear in her voice. "We should," he agreed, but neither of them moved. The train came to a stop at the platform with a great hiss of steam and a groan of metal that echoed through the empty station. And for a moment, everything was still and silent in a way that felt less like peace and more like the world was holding its breath. Then the doors opened. Sam could see figures inside the train, shapes that might have been people sitting in the seats and standing in the aisles, but they were blurry and indistinct, like looking at someone through frosted glass. And then a voice came from the train, clear and calm, and somehow both very old and very young at the same time. "Last call for passengers," the voice said. "Last call for the Midnight Express to everywhere and nowhere, to yesterday and tomorrow, to all the places you have been and all the places you will never go." Sam felt his feet begin to move toward the train as if they had a mind of their own, and beside him, Maya was moving too, her eyes wide and her mouth slightly open, and the golden light from the train windows seemed to reach out toward them like warm hands beckoning them closer. It was the flashlight that saved them. Maya had been gripping it so tightly that her finger accidentally pressed the switch, and the beam of light shot forward and hit the side of the train. And where the light touched the metal surface, Sam saw something that made his blood run cold. The train was not made of metal at all. It was made of something else entirely, something that shifted and moved and almost seemed to breathe. And in the split second before Maya dropped the flashlight in shock, Sam saw what looked like faces pressed against the inside of the train's walls, dozens and dozens of faces with open mouths and empty eyes, and he understood with horrible clarity that the train was not carrying passengers. The train was made of them. The Last Train to Nowhere, Part 2. Sam grabbed Maya by the arm and pulled her backwards so hard that they both stumbled and fell into the bushes, and the branches scratched their faces and hands, but neither of them cared, because the only thing that mattered was getting away from the train and those terrible faces pressed into its walls, like insects trapped in amber. The moment Sam's hand closed around Maya's wrist, something changed. The golden light from the train flickered like a candle in a storm, and the voice that had been calling for passengers let out a sound that was not quite a scream, and not quite a sigh, but something in between, something that carried with it a feeling of tremendous disappointment. "Do not look back," Maya gasped as they scrambled to their feet and ran, and Sam did not look back. Not even when he heard the train whistle blow again. Not even when the ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble with the force of something enormous beginning to move. Not even when the air around him grew so cold that he could see his own breath hanging in front of his face like tiny clouds. They ran all the way back through town without stopping, past the library and the park and the bakery and all the familiar places that suddenly seemed less familiar and less safe than they had ever been before. And they did not stop running until they reached the corner of Oak Street and Pine Road, where they had met just an hour earlier, though it felt like a lifetime had passed since then. They stood there bent over with their hands on their knees, gasping for air, and for a long time neither of them spoke because there were no words big enough to hold what they had just seen. Finally Maya straightened up and pushed her glasses back into place, and said in a voice that was trying very hard to sound normal, "So, I think we can agree that was not car headlights reflecting off the rails." Terror, and said, "No, I think we can definitely agree on that." "Those faces," Maya said, and now her voice was shaking, no matter how hard she tried to control it. "Sam, those faces in the walls of the train, they were people, actual people, and they looked like they were trapped, like they were trying to get out." "I know," Sam said quietly. "We need to tell someone." "Tell them what exactly? That we sneaked out in the middle of the night and saw a ghost train made out of people? They would think we were crazy, Maya. Or worse, they would ground us for the rest of our lives, and we would never find out what is really going on." Maya opened her mouth to argue, and then closed it again because she knew he was right. Adults had a way of hearing impossible things and turning them into problems that could be solved with punishments and early bedtimes. "Then we figure it out ourselves," she said, and there was a fire in her eyes that Sam had seen before. The same fire that appeared whenever someone told Maya she could not do something. The same fire that had driven her to read every book in the library, and win every science fair, and teach herself 3 languages just because a teacher once said that learning languages was too hard for kids her age. The next morning, Sam woke up feeling like he had not slept at all, which was mostly true since he had spent the remaining hours of the night lying in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about faces trapped in metal walls. And when he went downstairs for breakfast, his mother looked at him with concern and asked if he was feeling all right. "Just a bad dream," he said, which was technically not a lie, since the whole night had felt like a dream. Just not the kind you wake up from feeling rested. He met Maya at the town library after school, and found her already surrounded by a fortress of old books and newspapers, her notebook open and covered in her tiny, neat handwriting that looked like the work of a very organized spider. "I have been doing research," she announced without looking up. "I can see that. Sit down and listen, because this is where it gets interesting." Maya pushed her glasses up and flipped to a page in her notebook. The train that arrived in 1952, the one with no passengers that everyone talks about. It was not the first strange thing to happen at Ashwood Station, not by a long way. She slid an old newspaper clipping across the table, picked it up carefully, because it looked like it might crumble to dust if he breathed on it too hard. The headline read, "Railway Worker Reports Strange Lights on Tracks," and the date at the top said, October 1923. "Almost 30 years before the empty train," Sam murmured. "And that is not all." Maya pulled out another clipping, this one from 1931, with a headline about a conductor who quit his job after claiming he heard voices coming from the walls of the station at night. And another from 1940, about 2 children who went missing near the tracks and were never found. "The children," Sam said, feeling a cold weight settle in his stomach. "What happened to them?" "Nobody knows. The police searched for weeks and found nothing. The case was closed and everyone moved on. But here is the thing that really got my attention." Maya flipped to another page in her notebook. "I found a pattern. Every 11 years something strange happens at that station. The lights in 1923, the voices in 1931, and the missing children were in 1942. Not 1940, as I first thought. Then the empty train in 1953, not 1952, which means the records I found before were slightly wrong. Sam repeated. Every 11 years, Sam repeated. 1923, then 1934, then 1945, then 1956, then 1977, then 1978, then 1989, then 2000, then 2011, and now. Maya paused, and let the weight of what she was about to say fill the silence between them. 2022, which is this year, which is right now. Sam sat back in his chair, and the library suddenly felt too quiet and too large, like a room that was holding its breath. There is more, Maya continued, and she pulled out a very old book with a cracked leather cover that looked like it had been hiding in the deepest corner of the library for decades. I found this in the local history section behind a shelf that I do not think anyone has touched in years. It is a journal written by a man named Thomas Bell, who was the original engineer who built Ashwood Station back in 1885. She opened the book to a page she had marked with a small piece of paper, and pointed to a passage written in faded ink that Sam had to squint to read. He writes about the land the station was built on, Maya explained. He says the locals warned him not to build there. They said the ground was what they called thin in that spot, that it was a place where the boundary between our world and somewhere else was weak, like a worn patch on a piece of fabric that could tear open at any moment. And he built a train station on top of it. He thought they were being superstitious. He was a man of science and progress, and he did not believe in old stories about thin places and other worlds. But near the end of the journal, his writing changes. It becomes shaky and uneven. He starts writing about hearing things at night, sounds coming from underneath the station, sounds that he describes as hundreds of voices, all whispering at the same time. Time. What happened to him? Maya closed the journal carefully and looked at Sam with an expression that was equal parts excitement and dread. He disappeared in November of 1890, walked into the station one evening, and was never seen again. His family searched for him, the whole town searched for him, but Thomas Bell was simply gone. And here is the detail that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The date he disappeared was November 15th, exactly 11 years after he first broke ground on the station's construction in November of 1879. They sat in silence for a long moment, while the library hummed its quiet library hum around them, and the afternoon sunlight made long golden rectangles on the floor that reminded Sam uncomfortably of the golden light that had poured from the train windows. So every 11 years, Sam said slowly, the train comes back, and it is looking for passengers. And I do not think it is offering them a ride to somewhere nice, Maya added. We need to find out what happens next. We need to know when exactly it is going to come again, and if there is a way to stop it. Maya nodded and pulled out a calendar she had already marked up with dates and notes and calculations. Based on the pattern, the cycle is not just every 11 years. It intensifies over the course of several nights, getting stronger each time. The reports suggest it starts with sounds on the first night, then lights on the second, then the full train on the third, and on the fourth night. What happens on the fourth night? Maya hesitated, and Sam watched her swallow hard before she spoke again. On the fourth night, someone goes missing. Sam felt the world tilt sideways for just a moment, as the meaning of her words sank in. They had seen the full train last night, which meant last night was the third night, which meant tonight was the fourth night. Vanish, unless Sam and Maya could figure out how to stop a supernatural train that was made of stolen souls and came from a place that was not supposed to exist. Well, Sam said, with a calm he absolutely did not feel, I guess we are not sleeping tonight either. The Last Train to Nowhere, Part 3. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing, and by preparing, Sam meant that Maya made a detailed plan with bullet points and backup strategies. while he sat across from her, feeling both grateful and slightly terrified by how seriously she was taking the possibility that a train made of human souls was going to try to kidnap someone from their town. "We need to understand what we are dealing with," Maya said, tapping her pen against her notebook in a rhythm that matched Sam's heartbeat, which was going much too fast. The journal mentions that Thomas Bell heard voices underneath the station, and the old reports talk about the ground being thin, so whatever this thing is, it is connected to that specific place. "So the station is like a door," Sam said. "More like a wound," Maya corrected him. "A door you can close, but a wound just keeps opening up again if you don't treat it properly, and I think the train is what comes through the wound every time it opens, and it takes someone back with it. Every 11 years, one person, always on the fourth night. And based on the records I found, the people who disappeared were always alone near the station when it happened. The 2 children in 1942, a night watchman in 1956, a teenager in 1967, a homeless man in 1978, and so on. People nobody would look for very hard," Sam said, and the sadness of that thought hit him like a wave. "Or people who were already close to the station for their own reasons," Maya added. "The point is that the train seems to need someone to choose to board it. Remember last night when we heard the voice calling for passengers? It was not forcing us, it was inviting us, and when we ran away, it did not chase us. So it cannot take someone by force. I do not think it can, but I think it can be very persuasive. And I think on the 4th night its power is at its strongest, which means the invitation will be much harder to refuse." Sam thought about how his feet had started moving toward the train on their own last night, how the golden light had reached for him like warm hands, how the voice had made him feel like boarding the train was the most natural and obvious thing in the world. And he shivered, despite the warm afternoon. "What about your flashlight?" he said suddenly, remembering the moment the beam had hit the side of the train and revealed the truth. When the light hit the train, it showed what it really was, the faces in the walls, and the train seemed to react, like the light hurt it, or at least startled it. Maya's eyes widened, and she started writing furiously in her notebook. Yes, that is a very good point. The light disrupted the illusion. It showed what the train really looked like underneath the disguise. And the voice made that sound like it was in pain or surprised. So light is a weapon against it. Maybe not a weapon exactly, but a tool, something that reveals the truth. And if the train needs people to choose to board it willingly, then revealing the truth would ruin everything, because nobody would choose to board a train made of trapped souls. They looked at each other across the table, and Sam could see the plan forming behind Maya's eyes, the way it always did when she was solving a problem, like watching gears click into place inside a clock. "We need every flashlight and lamp and light source we can carry," Maya said, "and we need to be at the station before 2:17 tonight, and we need to make sure that nobody else is anywhere near that platform." "How do we keep people away from the station?" "The station is abandoned and on the edge of town. Most people never go near it, but we should check to make sure. And if we find anyone there, we need to convince them to leave." They split up after that. Maya went home to gather supplies, and Sam went to the station while it was still daylight to scout the area and look for any signs of what had happened the night before. And what he found made him stop in his tracks with his mouth hanging open. The weeds on the platform were dead, not just wilted or stepped on, but completely dead, blackened and shriveled, as if something had drained every drop of life out of them. And the pattern of the dead plants followed 2 parallel lines that ran the length of the platform, exactly where train tracks would be if the tracks extended onto the platform itself. Sam knelt down and touched one of the dead weeds, and it crumbled to ash between his fingers. And underneath the dead plant, the concrete of the platform was ice cold, despite the fact that the afternoon sun had been beating down on it for hours. He also noticed something else. scratched into the surface of the platform, in thin, shaky lines that could have been made by fingernails, were words. Dozens of words, overlapping each other in a desperate tangle that took Sam several minutes to sort out. And when he finally read them, the cold from the concrete seemed to seep up through his knees and into his bones. "Do not board," the words said, over and over and over again. "Do not board, do not board, do not board." Someone had tried to warn them, someone who had been here before. Maybe someone who had been taken by the train and had found one brief moment to scratch a message into the real world before they were absorbed into the walls of that terrible machine forever. Sam took photos of everything with his phone, and then walked around the rest of the station, looking for more clues. And in the old waiting room with its broken benches and peeling paint, he found something that made his heart jump into his throat. There was a man sitting on one of the benches. He was old, maybe 70 or 80, with a thin face and white hair that stuck up in all directions, like he had been running his hands through it for hours. And he was wearing a coat that was much too heavy for the season, and boots that were caked with mud. And he was staring at the far wall with an expression that Sam could only describe as waiting. "Excuse me," Sam said, and his voice came out smaller than he wanted it to. "Are you okay?" The old man turned his head slowly and looked at Sam with eyes that were pale blue and very, very tired, and for a moment he seemed confused, as if he had forgotten where he was or what year it was. "I heard it last night," the old man said, and his voice was rough, like he had not used it in a long time. "The whistle. I heard it just like I heard it back in 1967. Sam felt the air leave his lungs. 1967. You were here in 1967? "I was 16 years old, the man said, and a tremor ran through his hands that he tried to hide by pressing them against his knees. "My best friend Danny and I came to the station because we heard the stories, and we wanted to see for ourselves. Generation of kids in this town, just like you probably." "What happened?" Sam asked, even though a part of him did not want to know. The old man closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were wet. Danny walked toward the train. I tried to stop him. I grabbed his arm and I pulled, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. He just kept walking, and the light from the train was so warm and so beautiful, and the voice was promising things that made your heart ache with wanting. And for a moment I almost went with him. I almost stepped on board too, but something held me back. Maybe fear, or maybe luck, or maybe something else entirely. And Danny got on the train, the old man said, and a single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. And the doors closed, and the train pulled away, and Danny was gone. And nobody believed me. They said he ran away from home. They said he would turn up eventually, but he never did. And I have spent every day of that last 55 years wondering if there was something I could have done to save him. Sam sat down on the bench next to the old man, and for a while they just sat there together in the ruined waiting room, while the late afternoon light turned everything gold. And Sam thought about friendship and loss, and the terrible weight of surviving when someone you love does not. "It is coming back tonight," Sam said finally. "The fourth night." "I know," the old man said. "That is why I am here. I have been coming back every 11 years since 1967, sitting in this station and hoping that somehow Danny will come back. And every 11 years the train comes and goes, and Danny does not return. And I leave again, and wait another 11 years. What if we could stop it?" Sam said. "What if we could keep it from taking anyone else, and maybe even free the people trapped inside?" The old man looked at him with an expression that was half hope and half heartbreak. "Thinking about that for 55 years, son." "Well," Sam said, standing up and brushing the dust from his jeans, "now you do not have to think about it alone. My friend Maya and I have a plan, sort of. And we could use someone who has seen the train before and lived to tell about it." The old man stared at Sam for a long moment, and then slowly a smile crept across his face. The kind of smile that comes from a place so deep inside a person that it takes decades to reach the surface. "My name is Arthur," the old man said, and he held out his hand. "Sam," Sam replied, and shook it. And Arthur's grip was stronger than he expected, like the handshake of a man who had been waiting a very long time for someone to finally ask him to help. The Last Train to Nowhere, Part 4. Maya arrived at the station just as the sun was beginning to set, carrying 2 enormous bags that clinked and rattled with every step. And when she saw Arthur sitting on the bench next to Sam, her eyes went wide, and she immediately pulled out her notebook. "This is Arthur," Sam said. "He was here in 1967, when his friend Danny was taken by the train." Maya sat down on the bench across from them and listened without interrupting as Arthur told his story again. And Sam watched her write everything down with the focused intensity of a scientist recording data from an experiment that could change the world. When Arthur finished, Maya was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You said that something held you back when Danny walked toward the train, that you almost followed him, but something stopped you. Can you describe what that felt like?" Arthur thought about this for a long time, his eyes distant and his hands clasped together in his lap. "It was like being pulled in 2 directions at the same time," he said at last. "The train was pulling me forward with its light and its voice and all those promises, but something else was pulling me back. And the thing pulling me back felt like, well, it felt like the truth, like a small, clear voice inside my head that said, 'This is not real. This is not what it seems to be.'" Maya nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. "The truth," she repeated. "That matches what happened with my flashlight last night. The light revealed the truth about what the train really was, and the train reacted badly. I think the train operates on deception. It creates an illusion that is beautiful and inviting, and it uses that illusion to lure people in. But if you can see through the illusion, then it loses its power over you. So we need to show everyone the truth," Sam said. "Not everyone," Maya corrected. "Just anyone who might be near the station tonight. And more importantly, we need to find a way to break the illusion completely. Not just for a moment like my flashlight did, but permanently, or at least for long enough to disrupt whatever the train is trying to do." She opened her bags and started laying out her supplies on the bench. Flashlights of every size and shape, batteries, a portable lamp that ran on solar power, reflective tape, mirrors of various sizes, and something that looked like a large glass sphere that caught the fading sunlight and scattered it into tiny rainbows across the walls of the waiting room. "Where did you get all this?" Sam asked. "My garage. My parents' garage, the hardware store where Mr. Kim gave me a discount because I helped him fix his computer last month. And the glass sphere is actually an old crystal ball that belonged to my grandmother, who always said it had special properties, even though I am fairly sure it is just a decorative paperweight." Arthur picked up one of the mirrors and turned it over in his hands. "What is the plan exactly?" Maya pulled out a hand-drawn map of the station and the surrounding area and spread it on the bench between them. "The train arrives at 2:17 and stops at the platform. Based on the pattern, it will stay for approximately 7 minutes before leaving. During those 7 minutes, it tries to lure someone on board. Our job is to make sure that does not happen." She pointed to different spots on her map as she explained. "We set up light sources all around the platform, aimed at the tracks from every angle, so that when the train arrives, it is immediately hit with light from all sides. And we position the mirrors to amplify and redirect the light, creating a wall of illumination that the train cannot escape from." "And if the light reveals the truth like your flashlight did," Sam continued, catching on, "then anyone who sees the train will see what it really is, and they will not be tempted to board it." "Exactly. But there is a second part to the plan that is more important and also more dangerous." Maya paused, and Sam could see that whatever she was about to say was something she had been wrestling with all afternoon. "I do not think we should just try to stop the train from taking someone tonight," I think we should try to destroy it." The word hung in the air like smoke, and Arthur leaned forward with a sharp intake of breath. "How?" he asked, and there was a hunger in his voice that Sam understood completely, because if the train could be destroyed, then maybe, just maybe, the people trapped inside it could be freed, including Danny. "The journal," Maya said, pulling out Thomas Bell's old leather-bound book. "I read more of it this afternoon, and near the very end, in the last pages before his handwriting becomes completely illegible, Thomas Bell describes something he found underneath the station, a chamber built into the foundations, and in that chamber there is what he calls a convergence point, the exact spot where the ground is thinnest, the spot where whatever is on the other side pushes through into our world. And you think if we can reach that chamber," Sam said slowly, "we can do something about the convergence point." Thomas Bell wrote that the convergence point is like a lens that focuses the energy from the other side, and the train is a projection of that energy, a shape it takes in order to interact with our world. If we can block the lens, or break it, or redirect its energy somehow, then the train would lose its form. It would fall apart. "And the people inside it," Arthur whispered. "I do not know," Maya admitted, and her honesty was both brave and terrible. "They might be freed, they might simply cease to exist, or they might have ceased to exist a long time ago, and what we saw in the walls of the train are just echoes, memories of people rather than the people themselves. Anything, Arthur. I wish I could." Arthur sat very still for a long moment, and then he nodded once, firmly, like a man who had made a decision he had been putting off for 55 years. "Even if there is only a small chance of bringing Danny back, or of freeing whatever is left of him, then I have to try," he said. "I owed him that much in 1967, and I owe him that much now." They spent the next 2 hours setting up their light sources around the platform, positioning flashlights and lamps and mirrors according to Maya's careful calculations, and Arthur helped, despite his age and his shaking hands, moving with the determined energy of a man who had finally found a purpose after decades of waiting. While they worked, Sam found the entrance to the chamber Maya had described, a rusted metal hatch hidden beneath a pile of debris in the corner of the waiting room. And when he pulled it open, a wave of cold air rushed up from below that smelled like wet stone and something else, something that reminded him of the way the air smells just before a thunderstorm, charged and electric and full of potential. The hatch opened onto a narrow ladder that descended into darkness, and Sam shone his flashlight down and saw the glint of water on stone walls about 15 feet below. "I will go down," Sam said. "Absolutely not. I will go down," Maya said at the exact same time. "Neither of you should go down alone," Arthur said, and they both turned to look at him. "I will go. I am the oldest, and I have the least to lose, and I have been waiting 55 years to do something that matters." "No," Sam said firmly. "We do this together. Maya, you are the smartest person I know, and if anyone can figure out how to disrupt the convergence point, it is you. So you need to go down. Arthur, you know the train better than anyone, so you need to stay on the platform and manage the lights, and I will go with Maya in case she needs help." Like she wanted to argue, but then she just nodded, because the truth was they were running out of time. The sky was fully dark now, and the temperature was dropping, and Sam could feel something building in the air around the station, a pressure like the whole world was being squeezed. They did a final check of all the lights and mirrors, and then Sam and Maya lowered themselves through the hatch, one at a time, climbing down the rusty ladder into the cold darkness below the station, while Arthur stayed above, with his hand on the switch that would turn on every light they had set up. "Be careful," Arthur called down after them, and his voice echoed off the stone walls, and seemed to multiply until it sounded like 100 voices, all saying the same thing. The chamber at the bottom was exactly as Thomas Bell had described it, a circular room carved out of solid rock, with walls that glistened with moisture, and in the center of the floor there was a mark, circle within a circle, and the innermost circle was glowing with a faint light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "The convergence point," Maya breathed, and her flashlight beam trembled slightly as she pointed it at the glowing mark on the floor. Sam checked his watch, the numbers glowing green in the darkness. It was 2:14. 3 minutes until the train arrived, and somewhere above them in the darkness of the old station, they could already hear the first faint notes of a whistle beginning to sound. The whistle grew louder, and the glowing circles on the floor pulsed faster, and Sam could feel the vibration in his teeth and in his bones, and in a place deep inside his chest where he kept the things he was most afraid of. "The convergence point is activating," Maya said, kneeling beside the glowing mark and studying it with the kind of intense focus that most people reserve for things that are not trying to open a doorway to another dimension. "The energy is building. The train is forming right now, pulling itself together from whatever is on the other side." "Can you stop it?" Sam asked. "I need to think," Maya said, and she pulled out Thomas Bell's journal and flipped through the pages with hands that were shaking but steady enough. And Sam loved her for that, for being scared and brilliant at the same time. Above them the whistle reached its full terrible pitch, and Sam heard the unmistakable sound of the train arriving, the screech of wheels on rails, the hiss of steam, the groan of metal that was not really metal at all, and then Arthur's voice shouting something that was muffled by the stone ceiling between them. "The lights," Sam said, straining to hear. "He is turning on the lights." A moment later they heard a sound from above that was unlike anything Sam had ever experienced, a high-pitched shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if the air itself was screaming. And Sam knew that the light had hit the train, and the train had been revealed for what it truly was. Faces and souls and stolen lives pressed together into the shape of something that pretended to be ordinary. The convergence point on the floor flared brighter in response, the pulses becoming rapid and frantic like the heartbeat of a cornered animal, and the walls of the chamber began to vibrate and tiny pieces of stone rained down from the ceiling. "Maya," Sam said urgently. "No, give me a moment." She had the journal open to the last readable page, and she was tracing Thomas Bell's final words with her finger, reading aloud in a fast whisper. "He says the lens can be disrupted by introducing a counter-frequency, a vibration that is opposite to the one the convergence point produces. But he does not say what that frequency is. He just says it is the opposite of what the train offers." "The opposite of what the train offers," Sam repeated, trying to think while the chamber shook around them. "The train offers warmth and light and promises. It offers an escape. It offers you everything you ever wanted." "Which means the counter-frequency would be the opposite of all those things," Maya said. "Cold and darkness and honesty and staying and accepting what you have instead of running toward what you want." "That does not sound like a frequency. That sounds like a philosophy." "Maybe that is exactly what it is." Maya looked up at him and her eyes were bright with the kind of understanding that comes not from books, but from a deeper place. "Sam, I think the convergence point is not a physical thing that can be physically broken. I think it is something else, something that responds to intention and emotion and choice. The train works because people choose to board it. They choose the beautiful lie over the difficult truth, and the convergence point amplifies that choice and turns it into something real. So to disrupt it, we have to make the opposite choice. We have to choose the truth, loudly and clearly and with everything we have, right here at the source." The chamber lurched, and a crack appeared in the ceiling, and through the crack Sam could see the golden light of the train pouring down like liquid fire. And the voice he had heard the night before was now echoing through the chamber, louder and more insistent than ever. "Last call for passengers," the voice said. Terrible. And it wrapped around Sam like a blanket made of longing. "Last call for the train to everywhere you have ever dreamed of going, to everyone you have ever wanted to be, to a world where nothing hurts, and nothing is lost, and nothing ever ends. Sam felt the pull, stronger than it had been the night before, 1,000 times stronger, and he could see from Maya's face that she felt it too, her eyes going slightly glazed, and her body leaning forward toward the glowing circles on the floor, as if an invisible hand was drawing her in. "Maya," Sam said, and he grabbed her hand. "Maya, stay with me." "It is so warm," she whispered, and there were tears on her cheeks. "It says it can take me to a place where I am never afraid, and where I always have the answers, and where nobody ever tells me I am too much, or too strange, or too intense." "That place does not exist," Sam said, and he squeezed her hand as hard as he could. "And even if it did, it would not be real." "Are brilliant, because you are afraid and you look for answers anyway. You are amazing, because you are too much and too strange and too intense. And those are not flaws, Maya. Those are the best things about you." Maya blinked, and the glazed look faded from her eyes, and she squeezed his hand back. "You are right," she said, and her voice was clear and strong. "It is lying." "It is lying," Sam agreed. They stood together in the center of the chamber, holding hands over the convergence point, and they made their choice. Not the warm and golden and easy choice that the train was offering, but the cold and difficult and honest choice, to stay exactly where they were, to be exactly who they were, to accept the world with all its pain and beauty and imperfection, rather than trading it for a lie, no matter how lovely the lie might be. And as they made that choice, something extraordinary happened. The glowing circles on the floor began to dim, not all at once, gradually, like a fire burning down to embers, and the voice of the train faltered and cracked like a radio losing its signal, and the golden light that had been pouring through the crack in the ceiling flickered and went pale. "It is working," Maya whispered. From above they heard Arthur shout, a cry of triumph and disbelief. And then another sound joined his voice. Other voices, dozens of them, rising up from the walls of the chamber, and from the floor, and from the air itself. Voices that were confused and frightened, and relieved all at the same time, like people waking up from a very long and very bad dream. The convergence point pulsed one final time, a great wave of energy that knocked Sam and Maya backward and off their feet, and then the glow died completely, and the chamber was dark, except for the beam of Maya's flashlight, rolling in circles on the floor where she had dropped it. The silence that followed was the deepest silence Sam had ever known. Climbed up the ladder on shaking legs, and emerged into the waiting room to find Arthur standing on the platform, surrounded by every light they had set up, all of them still blazing, and the tracks in front of the station were empty. No train, no golden light, no voice calling for passengers. But the platform was not empty. There were people standing there, maybe 30 or 40 of them, men and women and children of all ages, wearing clothes from different decades, looking dazed and lost and very much alive, blinking in the harsh light of the flashlights as if they had just stepped out of a dark room into bright sunshine. And standing among them, looking exactly as he had in 1967, not aged a single day, was a 16-year-old boy with dark hair and a confused expression, who looked around the station and said in a bewildered voice, "Arthur, is that you? What happened? You look so old." Arthur made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. Toward the boy who had been his best friend 55 years ago, and who was still 16, and still wearing the same jacket he had been wearing the night he boarded a train that was not a train. "Danny," Arthur said, and his voice broke on the name like a wave breaking on a shore it has been trying to reach for decades. They embraced on the platform, while the other freed passengers looked around in wonder and confusion, and Maya quietly began writing everything down in her notebook, because that was what Maya did when the world became too big and too beautiful and too much to hold. And Sam stood and watched the old man and the young boy hold each other under the stars. And he thought about friendship and time, and the choices people make, and how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to chase after something wonderful, but to stand your ground and hold on to what is real. The sun came up an hour later and painted the old station in shades of pink and gold that were nothing like the false gold of the train. They were messy and uneven and imperfect and absolutely true. And Sam thought that was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. In the days that followed, the freed passengers were reunited with families who had long ago given up hope, and the town of Ashwood became briefly famous for a story that nobody outside the town fully believed. The old station was eventually torn down, and the ground beneath it was sealed with concrete and stone. Maya wrote a paper about the whole experience that won first place at the state science fair, even though the judges were not entirely sure it qualified as science. Arthur and Danny had a lot of catching up to do. 55 years of catching up, in fact. And it was strange and wonderful and heartbreaking all at once, because Arthur was an old man now, and Danny was still a boy. But they figured it out the way friends always do. One conversation at a time, one day at a time, one truth at a time. Time. P. And Sam, who had never sneaked out of his house before that first night, and who had never considered himself brave or special or important, learned something that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. That the most powerful thing in the world is not magic or mystery or even love, though love comes close. The most powerful thing in the world is the simple, stubborn, courageous choice to see things as they really are, and to love them anyway. He never heard the train whistle again, and nobody did.